Welcome, everybody. Super excited to have John offering this introduction to radical honesty for the Kindred Connect community. I took a course with John a few years ago, and it was really had a big impact on me. And so I really wanted to share this work with the Kindred community.
In general, in radical honesty type work, it's very interactional. That is, people are relating with each other a lot. But this is our first time together. Just welcome you to take this on maybe tonight, however you want to, as a kind of personal practice, kind of personal check-in, personal honesty practice. Just notice where you're coming from, because it's kind of a transition to go out of probably productivity time or wherever we were before, to come into a space where it's a little more human time. Uncertainty, false starts, nervousness, those kinds of things. And just invite you to be here as much as you can throughout this, since we are here together. And I just want to start with a little question to kind of prompt things. So just take a moment just to reflect on this for a second here. How would your life be different if you told the truth about what you've done, what you're experiencing, what you feel, and what you think? Just see what pops up. If there's any areas of life, certain people in your life who might come to mind.
Okay, and I just want to invite you to just notice, as you were thinking about that, just notice anything, any sensations in your body right now. So that might feel a little intense for some people, so feel free not to. But just as you're thinking about that question, how would life be different if you told the truth about what you've done, what you've experienced, what you feel and think with the people who matter to you in your life? And what sensations do you notice in your body as you think about that? That could be heat, cold, maybe some tension, relaxation somewhere. And then the third part is, for those of you who are able to see people, just look around at the other faces that are here tonight. We did a little thinking, then you just kind of sensed into your body, and now just notice people outside of you, all these other folks. Maybe you just see some names. Maybe you just see some pictures. Maybe you just see actual faces, me talking. All right, that's it. That's all you have to do. Okay, so I'll just tell you, there's three of us here tonight. My name is John, and I'm a radical honesty trainer, and I've been in the RH community, just so you have a little sense of me. I've been in the RH community for about 10 years, and I got certified in 2017, and I've been leading all different types of workshops and coaching and things since then. I just want to talk for a few minutes just about this thing called radical honesty, so that we're kind of on the same page, because there's lots of different ways of thinking about radical honesty that are out in popular culture. Then the main one being something called brutal honesty, which is its ugly stepbrother operating somewhere. Okay, so I want to share this with you. Okay, so just want to kind of get us on the same page a little bit about what is radical honesty. So this will be sort of like a little bit of intellectual content for you to take in for a few minutes here. Okay, so what is it? So, broadly, it's a book that was written by Brad Blanton, who's a psychotherapist who trained all of us here. And if you haven't read it, it's a really interesting book. Check it out when you have a moment. It's also kind of a perspective and a point of view. It's a way of processing, and then it's also a community. So there's a whole community of people who like to get together and practice in this way, try to bring it into their lives as much as they can. But I think most primarily the way I'd like to share our thinking about it tonight is that radical honesty is actually a noticing practice and an out loud meditation. So a noticing practice is sort of noticing what's coming up moment to moment and sharing it out loud with another person. Maybe a lot of us or some of us here have experienced seated meditation. The seated meditation is sort of a noticing practice for one's own self and being. Radical honesty is a kind of two-person meditation where you're sharing that out loud with the other person is responding. So what it isn't, it's not brutal honesty or dumping opinions and walking away from someone. And we can talk more about that. There might be questions about that. But that's pretty far from what it is. And these two words that keep coming up, radical and honesty, the radical part is really that we're trying to get to the root of what's happening between us. And can we clearly share that with another person? Can we get to really being able to describe our experience to another person? So some ways I think if people are interested in radical honesty, they're really interested in clear descriptions of their experience so the other person can get it and they can get it as well. The other part of radical is that it's unconventional. We tend to pretend we're happy when we're sad, or pretend we're feeling fine when we're really angry. So in some ways, this kind of way of relating is unconventional in that we have to perform so much of the time. Now, there might be important times where we need to perform, but this is kind of pushing the other direction. And then there's this word honesty. And honesty by itself, I think probably most of us have an idea of just what that is. And most of the time, it's mostly our opinions. I think this way, you think that way. And then we kind of battle around our opinions, which is why I think radical honesty gets lumped in with brutal honesty or dumping. Because our culture's way of thinking about honesty mostly has to do with our thoughts and opinions. So just want to open it up a little bit that we actually think a little bit differently about what honesty means. It's a little bit more than just sharing your opinions with people. And it opens us up into the question of what can you actually be honest about? It might not be so obvious at first. So in our language, this is the main distinction in radical honesty. There's three things in our awareness that you can actually share with another person. You can share what you're noticing outside of you in this moment. So here's a picture of Broadway, downtown LA. You can see like a yellow light. It's a person with a bag. There's a building. There's a shoe, a foot, some hair. There's a sky. That's outside. That's things you can share that are outside of you in the moment. The second thing you can share is your sensations inside your body. We don't have a lot of good words for this language because we tend not to attend to our body that much in our culture. Our culture is much more of a mental culture. But sensations is a big part of what we do in the community. So sensations are things like heat, cold, tension, tightness, dry mouth, things like that. So that's what you can share that you're experiencing inside your body in this moment. And then lastly, what's mostly associated with honesty is our thoughts. So all of the thoughts that come up, fears, worries, judgments, criticisms, most of the time honesty is relegated to this space by itself. So we want to open it up to primarily actually focus on outside and inside. So here's another way of talking about it. It's three categories. What you notice in the present outside of yourself, all these faces that are in front of you. What you notice in the present inside your body, these sensations. Ooh, tightness. Oh, I'm looking at you. I notice tightness in my stomach. My armpits are sweating. And then what you notice in the present in your mind, imaginings, thoughts, worries. In our community, we tend to say words like imagining. I'm imagining that. I judge that. So you're really kind of saying that, oh, I know that this is something from my mind. Another way to say this, 3 categories: outside, inside, upside down. Upside down are all the thoughts. This is called the awareness continuum. If you ever come to more radical honesty stuff, we will talk about this and point to this ad nauseum. This is the essential distinction. Because you can only be as honest as you are aware. So we're practicing with each other, knowing whether we're in our imaginings, whether we're in our sensations, or whether we're noticing something on the outside. It might be a little less argument if I say, I imagine that you're this, this, and this, because I'm floating at least, that I'm noticing that I'm sort of making it up. But yeah, all the arguments mostly happen in the mental realm, totally with you. I'd like you to, just right here, this is just a little experiential part. I'd like you to just, I'll put this in the chat too, but I'd like you to just have just a short conversation about what it is that brought you to this little talk about radical honesty, and maybe what areas of your life you'd like to bring a little more of yourself to, be a little more honest in. Just for a few minutes. Open if anybody wants to share anything, you don't need to, but I'm just interested, you were put into a room, most likely you didn't know the person, maybe some of you know each other, but you were in a room where you didn't know somebody talking about this thing called honesty. Probably a little strange. So, and I also just invite you to remember those 3 things that we can share honestly about, and maybe use some of those, that's sensations inside the body, something you noticed in the room, and also something that was coming up for you as a thought. The RH is also a perspective, and just want to share with you just a few things about that perspective. And of course, because I'm saying it's a perspective, it means it's not a universal truth. So it's a perspective about looking at things. And the first one here is kind of the lying and withholding are major causes of suffering, including stress, depression, anxiety, and psychosomatic disorders. So those last couple things have come out of Brad Blanton's work after, being a clinical psychologist for 35 years or so, and was trying to boil down, what does it seem like, what seems to make therapy work? What are the successful people who do therapy? And what are the ones where therapy just doesn't seem to work? And he boiled it down to, there's something about honesty, getting over withholding to deal with these various issues. We all perform and deceive each other, most notably by withholding. Withholding is probably the one that withholding and omitting is probably the one that we tend to focus on the most, because we tend to do those things either to manage how we are seen by other people, and withholding information that might be useful to the other person, but might not serve us in some way. So we tend to speak about withholding quite a bit. And then what you resist persists. So kind of the idea here is that the kind of the stress and suffering that's caused by a withholding kind of pattern, it sticks around. And when that sticks around, the various kinds of patterns and self-suffering and things tend to persist. So what's the point of doing something called radical honesty or sharing these things? Is that telling the truth helps you experience your experience. We say this 6,000 times, helps you experience your experience fully so that it can change. And experiencing your experience has a lot to do with that awareness continuum we were talking about. So we sort of look at it as the deeper you experience your experience, the more that the sensations, you can feel them. So it's a more intense experience. But as you experience those sensations, allows them to come and go. So as we talked about, like those 3 things you can be honest about, if you can be in contact with another person by looking at them, that's outside. You can be aware of the sensations inside your body at the same time, that's inside, and aware of your thoughts going on. That's a pretty intense experience to be having with another person. So in our experience, that allows feelings of anger and sadness and things like that to rise and come and go. So that's sort of the foundation of all the processing work that we do, is this idea of developing the capacity to experience your experience more fully so that it can come and go. When you tell the truth, sensations will increase and then diminish. Might not go away, but there will be a shift. And so in the telling of the truth as clearly as you can, something new will emerge. So that's the idea. Any thoughts or anything? Questions, or that there's some way that there is an increase of sensation before we feel like we're going to share something that means something to us with another person? So that might be a little bit of sweatiness or tight stomach, or the mouth might get dry and it's like, oh, here I go. I'm going to say this thing. And then as it's said, and if it's said clearly, right? And if it's said in a way that's really descriptive, then the sensations will probably increase even more. So for example, if I'm looking at Kato and I didn't like something that Kato did, and I said to her, I'm mad at you for saying to me, da 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 da. Oof, that's going to increase even more because I've just shared that, I've just revealed something now, increase of sensation. Then, of course, depending on what happens with that person, I mean, that's up for grabs, we'll see. But in general, that intensity of sensation has to change. There's something that has to move there at some point. Whereas when we don't share certain things and we keep them, the sensations tend not to change. So we carry them around, which creates, I think, a lot of the reasons why people go to groups or psychotherapy or things like that. So yeah, that's kind of the idea. I like how you said we don't die, because the idea is I'm trusting that when you're sharing these things, you're going to share it with someone who's not going to kill you. But that said, a lot of us come with a lot of trauma, and our nervous systems are sensitive to various things. And so there might be, as you're wanting to come forth and share something, some thought that pops up, I'm going to die if I do this. So it is a developing a kind of tolerance for the capacity of that nervous system to get slightly activated so that can come and go, which in general is kind of the basis of all good psychotherapy. But that takes time. The sensations as you're speaking about something and how those can be overwhelming, but you're speaking about the other side of it, which is that when I don't share that, the holding, the sensations of holding actually become overwhelming over time. Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, and part of the thing too, let's say about compassion, is that as we practice describing what it is we want with the communication, that's one of the ways we could put that in there. It's like, you can try to gen up compassion, or if you feel it, great. But it could be something like, hey, I really want to have a conversation where my compassion is really at the forefront here. I'm not sure I actually feel that compassionate right now, but I'd like compassion to be there. So there's ways that you can take, your values and put it into the conversation, as opposed to, I notice what a lot of communication techniques do is they want to get you to kind of feel a bunch of stuff prior to the conversation. So I'm angry, but let me do certain kinds of things to make it more palatable and things like that. So you can bring all that in. I'd really like to focus on this. Okay. So I'd like to try something also with you here. We did a little bit about the perspective and about the awareness continuum. And I just want to bring into the space here too. So everybody came because there's something maybe about this honesty thing that's interesting. But it's a little bit scary too. So I just wanted to have a chance for us to kind of speak our spheres a little bit about what it'd be like to be more honest with the people who matter to us in our lives. And what comes up for you when you think, if you imagine someone in your life who maybe you have a little unfinished business with, or you have something you'd like to say, what comes up? What has kept you from having those kinds of conversations? What are the fears for you in particular? So not general, for you. Everybody's got a little different versions of that. What comes to mind for you about if you were bringing yourself a little more fully to your conversations with people who matter to you? What comes up for you? What's so scary about it? These out here, I heard time, it's a pain in the ass. It takes a lot of time. Could be misunderstandings, and you might have more knowledge than they do about certain types of ways of interacting. and causing disconnect. The worry about sharing with others because it might cause disconnect. Right? A radical honesty perspective would be something like, I'm nervous to tell you that I don't actually feel the things for you that seems like you feel for me, and I'm a little bit nervous that might make our relationship a little bit strange, but I really care about you and I like our friendship, and da 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 da. Sharing a little bit more of the field of things. But I think you're so right. To hurt the other person's feelings is a huge reason why we will stay silent. Yeah. We fear if we share too much about who we are and what's going on with us, we'll lose the other person. They'll disappear, they'll go away. Yeah. Kind of cultural rules. I thought of family rules too. Like in my family, no, you don't share anything like that. You're not one to be, the kids aren't the ones to be listened to. So my family rule was, shut up. And then fear of disrespecting them, fear of hurting their feelings, disrespect and all. Cool. Thank you. Important one to bring up. Yeah. Retaliation. Absolutely. I mean, power is a big part of all this too. Power in all different forms, cultural power, racism, sexism, homophobia, all these different kinds of issues around power and speaking up. Yeah. So part of it too is, trusting you all to speak to the people who matter to you in a way that you can also keep yourself safe. Anyone else? Other just personal fears of sharing yourself a little more? Yeah, absolutely. Gaslighting, diminishing, disregarding. Yeah. And I heard too, like the resignation part of if I don't imagine I'll get understood in a certain kind of way, why bother? Was that also part of what you said? I want to check in with you about that. Here, I'm gonna I just type these all out here so you can see these. You see in the chat here, these fears of bringing yourself forward and sharing what your experience actually is. It might be time, pain in the ass, misunderstanding. Person might not have knowledge of the kinds of communication, so we might not get the responses that we want, causing disconnect, hurting the other person's feeling, tension, abandonment, honesty to elders, family rules, fear of disrespecting, retaliation, threatening, gaslighting, diminishing, disregarding. Oof, baby. I mean, I see this list and I'm like, yeah, no wonder I don't say anything. Jeez. And somehow there is still this pull to show up to something like this about honesty, because there's something that I don't know, it calls to me, maybe calls to you about bringing yourself forward and sharing more of who you are with people who matter to you. So I wanted to then, on the other side, what has been either your experience or what do you imagine your experience would be when you do share what's real for you, what's so for you, what's going on? Because if there ain't any real benefits, we better just get off this call right now. Yeah. Open up new forms of communication, topics to talk about, what we speak about, more love and empathy, more emotional connection, romantically or otherwise. That's a major payoff, all the stuff you just said there. Yeah. Openness and expansiveness, some kind of energetic movement, fully present, deep in connection, open energetically. Yeah, the other word comes to mind when you say all that is like congruence. It's like when we are congruent, all the stuff is sort of aligned together with that other person. Yeah, cool. So the benefits, we have being heard, understood. I put I'm alive from what Colin was saying as well. Like I'm alive, I didn't die. I'm not alone, deep in connection, to get to know someone better, open up new forms of communication, topics, who we speak to, more love and empathy, more emotional connection, shifting and moving energy, openness and expansiveness, energetic movement, fully present, deep in connection, opening energetically, trusting. So we have a few more than the fears. There's a lot going on there. So it's both of those things, right? It's like we're attending to both of those things now when we're doing this honesty thing, when we're bringing ourselves forward. There's all these fears, and at the same time, there's all these benefits. And I appreciate you all for bringing these into the space, just to have them be part of the conversation, because it's not so simple of just, there's a lot to be said about honesty, because honesty includes our whole selves. which includes all our fears, includes all these benefits and things like that that are part of it. Okay, so we've got a few minutes left, and I want to play a little game to kind of step a little bit further into the radical honesty space as we get to know each other, although we don't know each other that well. Just one last thing about these fears and benefits. One of the ways that we think about in radical honesty is that while we have all these fears, one of the ways to think about fears too is that there's a kind of uber fear or a big fear that's underneath all the fears. And the fears are something about the fear of having certain kinds of sensations. Fear of having certain kinds of sensations. So at some point, we probably had pretty scary sensations. And when those sensations come up in the body, often they come up prior to all the thoughts that say, I'm scared of this, I'm scared of this. So there's a sense of like, woof. That's part of the work we try to do when we're doing radical honesty groups and all. We keep attending back to our sensations. So you'll hear trainers and all just ask, what do you notice in your body? What do you notice in your body? Because part of it is to begin to develop the capacity to be with all the sensations that are in our body. Because a lot of the fears in communication have to do with nervousness, tightness in the stomach. You know, heart is beating really fast. Anger has a whole series of sensations that accompany it. And as we sensitize ourselves to be able to tolerate those sensations, we're able to stay in conversations longer and be with others. So I just put that there as just an idea to play around with, that underneath these interpretations of our fears, there's this other deep fear, is that we're really nervous about certain kinds of sensations that we have. For each person, that's a little bit different. We each have our own histories. Some people have trauma histories, so being with the body in those kinds of ways are challenging. But that's something that will keep coming forward in radical honesty groups. What do we notice in our body? Because it goes back to that idea that the more we experience our experience fully, the more it can come and go. So if you're speaking with someone, you're also noticing sensation in your body, you'll probably notice it's a lot more intense of an experience. And the benefit of the intensity of that experience is that the sensations have more of a possibility of coming and going. Okay, here's our little game as we go off tonight. We got 15 minutes here. It's a little game here we call Sometimes I Pretend. Sometimes I pretend. And it's very simple. We usually do it in a group. It's a circle. And let me make sure I can see everybody. And so some people don't have their video on. That's okay now, but let's try this out. What I'd like you to just do is finish this statement. Sometimes I pretend X when actually Y. Sometimes I pretend, think of certain ways you pretend in your life, when actually I'm feeling or thinking a certain way. So how we'll do this, I'm going to popcorn over and I'm going to say this staccato. And how we do this in a group usually is once you share it with someone, then the person says thank you. Because it's kind of risky to share a little bit of the way that you're pretending. You know, one of your ways that you pretend. And so then from Kato, I'll ask you to just pick someone and popcorn it that direction. So Kato, sometimes I pretend that I have it all together and I'm not nervous when really I'm like shit in my pants. Well, how you doing? How you feeling towards the other people in this group after you've heard the ways that they're pretending? Welcome to share just a moment of what it's like being with the group now. Yeah, I feel like there's some way that like pretty much everyone's share could be my share as well. We're kind of, there's some way that a lot of us are all pretending in similar ways with each other. I'm not sure if we can give up all the pretending at once, but there is ways that we seem like we're pretending a lot. And particularly in this group, you know, there were multiple mentions of being in conversations you don't want to be in. And also the feeling of overwhelm. Feeling like I have to keep it all together, and underneath is this anxiety and like things falling apart. I don't know what you think. I mean, I think there might be something about this time too, in particular, this feeling of overwhelm. It's like, oof, as well, and trying to have to keep it all together. Yeah, it's really something. Maybe we need to have a second meeting where it's the don't hold it all together meeting. and we can hang out with not being held together by holding each other together. I'm just spitballing here. Okay, so we're right at the end. And you know, one of the things that comes up often just in the future, if you ever decide to come back to a longer group, a group where there's more time, there'll be more opportunities to actually conflict will arise. So all of these fears that came up around not being understood, these kinds of things tend to emerge in the group, and then we work it through. Something that can't happen as much in a shorter time, but a lot of the ways of communicating that's moment to moment with those 3 levels of awareness are the stuff that we practice in the group together. So I just want to put that out there that at some point, you know, if you'd like to come Saturday, we're going to do a workshop, but there'll be other workshops in LA as well. And really, I think of the workshop space as kind of like an adult playground for leaning into exploring a little bit more of being honest than you would maybe in your normal life with people who are also playing the same game. So that creates already a little bit more safety and a little bit more, I mean, if there is any such thing as safety, I don't really think there is, but it creates a little bit more of a container. So just wanted to bring that up as well to y'all if you're interested in kind of being with others in this way and working with conflict and appreciation that comes up between all of us and learning more about yourself. So thank you so much. I hope you got a few things from this tonight. I feel really tender right now, I have to say. I actually feel really tender for all the stuff that you shared just in the sometimes I pretend, especially about the overwhelm thing. I also work as a psychotherapist, so I'm seeing a lot of people who are really feeling overwhelmed, and I'm just like kind of heartened to that right now. So I appreciate you all for playing that game and saying what you did. On Saturday, we're going to be doing more, so it's going to be more relating with each other. And we're going to use some of the tools and distinctions of radical honesty to help clarify the communication so that you get practice in being able to take some of that stuff back to your own life and use it with people who matter the most to you. So developing a little bit more of your capacity to be with difficult conversations and express joy, and practice with others who want to practice the same kind of game. So that'll be 10 to 4 on Saturday. That'll give a little more time for us to work through some things. And in terms of for people who are in LA, there will be, I'll do some more in-person stuff. Would love to see you all if you want to do stuff in person at some point. I'll email you afterwards and we can talk about maybe organizing something like that. I have a couple of groups here for people who've gone through some workshops. It's an ongoing group, but for stuff for people who might want to do stuff in this way. If you've done NVC, if you've done authentic relating, similar, very different in practice when we're actually in a workshop. So if you're very different actually. So if you're interested, that'll be there. Feel free to just email me or contact me as well. It's just put my email here again. And for those of you in LA, we're in the same place, so stay in touch.